The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is one of the largest metropolises in the world in terms of area. They also love their sport here, especially football. Put those two things together, and it means a ton of stadiums. With that being said, here are the stadiums of Dallas-Fort Worth. Maverick Stadium is one of the many college football stadiums in the city. Despite a capacity of over 12,000, the stands don't stretch the length of the pitch, which leads to a very condensed seating arrangement. That's a good thing though. More people have an ideal viewing angle. Not a bad stadium to start with. Way over on the other side of the campus we have College Park Center, a building that would suggest that the University of Texas Arlington is more of a basketball college. It's a pretty decent, compact modern venue, one of the reasons why the Dallas Wings of the NBA play here as well. Tommy Standridge Stadium. Another college stadium, actually, I'm not going to keep pointing that out, there are heaps of them. It does have a very similar design to Maverick Stadium actually, but this has a bit more of an elaborate facade, at least on one stand, quite imposing. Apogee Stadium is one of the more distinctive football stadiums going round, but more importantly, I just think it's freaking cool that they have their own bird killing contraptions. Too many birds. But not only do they provide a cheap source of poultry for the chicken sandwiches at the stadium, as a byproduct, they can also produce electricity to run the stadium. If that isn't the very definition of mean green, I don't know what is. Another unique feature is this stand to the north. It's supposed to resemble the team's eagle logo. But yeah, I really do like this stadium. UNT Coliseum. The Mean Green's basketball arena is also very odd looking actually. On the inside, not as much, which is something befitting of the Coliseum name. Well, maybe not the green seats, but crumbling concrete steps just don't cut it anymore. It's a clean looking seating bowl and a decent video board setup. Good combo. Eagle Stadium. If you've just taken a sip of coffee, I'll give you a second. Okay, this is a high school football stadium. Oh, what did I just tell you, dude? Yeah, it's a $60 million high school stadium. To be fair, the Allen Eagles represent the biggest high school in Texas, with around 7,000 students, and the stadium is owned by the entire school district, and is used by several schools. But still, it boggles the mind for someone who didn't grow up in Texas. Oh, and this isn't even the most expensive high school stadium in the city. Stay tuned. Panther Stadium. It's another high school stadium, but it's safe to say it's not quite in the same league as the last one. Well, it might be in the same league, I don't know. But it's not as good is what I'm trying to say. Still, for a high school in any other country, it would be mind-blowing. AT&T Stadium. When the Cowboys built this billion-dollar stadium over a decade ago, a lot of people probably regarded it as the best stadium in the country, and many still do. After 13 years, it still looks brand spanking new, and its amenities are still elite. It's one of two stadiums in the city with a retractable roof, and even when it's closed, there's plenty of natural light that flows in through those big glass windows, without the attached heat that the sun tends to provide. It has one of the biggest video board setups going round, and the capacity can expand to 100,000. There's just too much to say and too little time. Marcus Marauders Stadium. When the Marauders built this $1,000 stadium over a decade ago, a lot of people probably regarded it as a stadium in the country, and many still do. Yeah, it's a no-frills stadium, but the water tower has their logo on it. The Cowboys could only dream of perks like that. John Clark Stadium. On the surface, it doesn't seem anything special, but I like the architecture here. The main stand has a bit of a contemporary feel to what would just be another standard high school stadium. They've got a decent little scoreboard as well. Dragon Stadium. Whether dragons are real or not is still being debated by scientists and potheads alike. But the Carroll Dragons certainly are a real team, and the stadium is pretty darn good. The main stand is Allen Eagles' level of quality, the rest, not so much. Dickies Arena. This palace-like building is a fairly new venue with a bit of an eclectic mix of tenants, a lacrosse team, a bit of basketball here and there, and an annual rodeo, which I think is actually a pretty big deal in the city. It has a surprisingly simple and uncluttered layout, as well as that huge video board. It's rather nice. And over here we have another venue that hosts the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum. It's actually very similar to Dickies Arena, both outside and in. That was clearly intentional. Obviously this one being over 80 years older means it doesn't quite offer the same amenities, but still alright. Eagle Stadium. Yes, it's not quite as impressive as the Eagle Stadium we saw earlier, but it's still pretty good. The exterior features some nice stonework, and the main stand has a decent amount of chairback seats. Kuykendall Stadium. From out front, you'd hardly notice that there's a stadium here, because it's built into the earth, the main stand at least. The other stand looks like a podium, so that's something. E.H. Hamby Stadium, home of the Mesquite Skeeters. Now that's a good team name, in case you're wondering, a skeeter is a mosquito. I'm one of the lucky ones that doesn't get bitten by mosquitoes too often. I think it's because of the cologne I wear. It's pungent, I tell you what. Riders Field is one of the most amazing minor league ballparks there is. For starters, the exterior is very easy on the eye. The architecture here is inspired by Churchill Downs. Also, the seating layout is a little unconventional, with these separate pavilions and their balconies rather than a continuous upper deck. But the most extraordinary aspect of this ballpark is that it has its own lazy river. That's just incredible. Ford Center at the Star is the Dallas Cowboys training facility. But don't get it wrong, it's still a fully fledged indoor football stadium with a capacity of 12,000. It could easily host a moderately successful FCS football team, but no, it's just for those who want to watch the Cowboys train, as well as some obligatory high school football here and there. Tom Kimbrough Stadium. This one features yet another beautiful brick facade. I like the splashes of blue here and there that liven the place up. There's a nice scoreboard, and yeah, it's a very tidy looking stadium. Way out in the far reaches of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is Children's Health Stadium, one of the more expensive high school football stadiums at around $50 million. But I think they got their money's worth. The exterior is very impressive, as is that huge video board, and man, do people in Texas realize this isn't normal?
Of course it's normal. According to city bylaw, every suburb's gotta have a barber, a post office, a general store, and a kick-ass high school football stadium.
Okay, thanks.
It's always been that way.
Alfred J. Lewis Fieldhouse is one of the biggest high school arenas going round, but it's not the biggest or arguably the best high school arena in the city. That'll be coming up soon. It's kinda similar to the rodeo venues we saw earlier. Yeah, it's a little dated, but for a high school gym, very impressive. American Airlines Center. The hangar, as it's appropriately nicknamed, is the home of the Mavericks of the NBA and the Stars of the NHL, comfortably making it the city's premier arena. The exterior is certainly its most impressive aspect. And while the interior is impressive in its own right, there just isn't a lot that sets it apart from other arenas in the NBA or NHL. Still an elite venue. Toyota Stadium. This place is actually home to the US Soccer Hall of Fame. Not sure I would have guessed Frisco, Texas as the home of soccer. I can't say that it's one of the better MLS venues, but it does the job, I suppose. I'm not such a fan of this section that is so obviously there for concerts. It just doesn't gel with the rest of the stadium. Mesquite Memorial Stadium. Not content with a nearly 20,000 capacity football stadium for their high school, they had to go and build themselves their own tower. I swear, whoever looks after the budget at Texas high schools is taking tips from the dictators of the Middle East by commissioning all these extravagant buildings. Hopefully they don't murder dissidents as well. Air Hogs Stadium. This former baseball stadium is currently being converted into a cricket stadium. You heard that right, unless you heard anything other than cricket stadium. It will be home to the US national team, as well as a Major League Cricket franchise. Choctaw Stadium was home to the Texas Rangers until recently, but has since undergone a minor renovation that has transformed it into a rectangular stadium, kind of. It's now home to a rugby club, a soccer club, and the Dallas Renegades will return when the XFL does. It's certainly an odd-looking stadium nowadays, but I still like those balconies, even if they are now somewhat redundant. Homer B. Johnson Stadium.
The B stands for B.
Okay, that Homer impression was terrible, but it's still better than the Simpsons attempt at an Australian accent. This is a little peculiar in that it's an entirely sunken stadium. And there's this unusual seating situation behind the south end zone. Looks cool though. Vernon Newsom Stadium. Another beauty. This one featuring an elaborate brick exterior, a split-level stand on each side with a wraparound concourse passing through. What more could you ask of a high school stadium? Oh yeah, no tower. Herman Clark Stadium. Now this is a bit of an interesting design choice. The exterior of the stands here look like they could withstand heavy shelling. Bit odd, but it's good to see something a little different. John Kincaid Stadium. Yet another high school stadium that's home to more than a dozen teams. Good to see a grass berm, we haven't seen as many as in the LA video. And at the other end, basically attached to the stadium, is the Alice Davis Fieldhouse, one of the more extraordinary high school basketball arenas you'll see. There's a slick modern exterior, a good mix of benches and chairback seats on the inside, as well as a large center-hung scoreboard. This would make for an excellent venue even for a professional team. Globe Life Field is Arlington's and the metro area's second stadium to cost over $1 billion. But despite the high price tag, this ballpark gets a lot of hate. Some people think it didn't need to be built in the first place. Some people think, well, it's good to be out of the hot sun, but gosh darn is it ugly. But for me, that's only the exterior. I think it looks incredible on the inside, particularly the elevated outfield seating. Very comfortable seats by all accounts as well. Texas Motor Speedway. Yeah, there's actually a speedway within the city limits. If you count it as a stadium, it's the biggest in the city, with a seating capacity just shy of 120,000, but with the capability of accommodating close to 200,000. 10,000 of that capacity is in the form of luxury suites, and at the other end of the spectrum, there are even a few hundred spaces for tents in the infield. Cotton Bowl is a stadium that's glory days are well and truly over. It was home to the Cowboys for over a decade, and of course the Cotton Bowl game for most of its existence. It still holds some annual games, and although the amenities are a little lackluster and it's a little monochromatic and dull on the inside, I do still hope it stays around. It's an interesting look into a bygone era. Wiley ISD Stadium. Interesting that the Wiley School District Stadium has a running track around the field. I thought they were known for their dedication to road runners. Beep beep. I'm starting to think that guy was right. Every suburb does seem to have a stadium. Amon G. Carter Stadium. Although it's not the biggest or most expensive stadium in the metro area, I'd say that after improvements in recent years, it might be my favourite stadium in the city. That buff brick facade sets it apart from most college stadiums, as does that stand beyond the south end zone, which has a bit of a balcony situation going on. The steep western stand must be a very imposing sight for the visiting team. Lupton Baseball Stadium is the biggest college ballpark in the city, and a pretty good one. There's a decent amount of covered seating in the double-decker grandstand, but even better is the vast amount of grass terracing throughout the rest of the stadium. Just be careful not to sit on any horned frogs. Schollmeyer Arena is an old-fashioned domed arena that, after a major renovation, has been built up and modernized, as you can probably see. If you've watched the channel for a little while, you'll know that I'm gonna love that all-purple interior. Well, the court isn't purple, but very few courts are. Looks stunning. Joy and Ralph Ellis Stadium. This is really plain and simple from above, but it does have a bit of style to the exterior with those hits of green, followed up by those green chairback seats on the inside. Not bad. C.H. Collins Athletic Complex. Now this one is literally at the edge of the city. To the north is only farmland, but clearly proximity to the city doesn't relate to the quality of the stadium. This is another excellent venue. I like those little houses in each corner. McKinney District-wide Stadium is the nation's and obviously the world's most expensive high school football stadium, at a whopping $70 million. Now you might think that that's a ridiculous waste of money that could have been spent elsewhere. But it's not like the stadium doesn't generate money, it's used by multiple schools and yes, $70 million is a bit much for high school football. It might not quite be as flashy as some of the other stadiums we've seen, but Farrington Field has class. Having been built in the 30s, there's a bit of an Art Deco vibe to the facades, and its perimeter is surrounded by trees, which is always good. Yeah, there's just a certain elegance to this place. Gerald J. Ford Stadium. You know how they found out what the average human being looks like? It's this guy. Well, I think if you averaged out all of the college football stadiums and designed a stadium based on that, it would be something like this. It has a medium capacity, a horseshoe seating layout, grass berm, brick facade, but no fancy extras. That downtown view has got to be better than average though. Moody Coliseum. With that grand entrance and overall more classical looking exterior, this place probably deserves the title of Coliseum more than the UNT Coliseum we saw earlier. Calls itself a Coliseum. The interior features steep and compact seating, and although it was built in the middle of the 20th century, it's looking great after a renovation 8 or 9 years back. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it,
I've come to the conclusion that hitting the subscribe button would be the most sensible option going forward.
but it's up to you. Thanks for watching, have a good one.